And we are live here on Sunday night. It's not Dave's tackle box tonight. Tonight is the VT talk that didn't go out on Thursday because we weren't here. But we are now because it's Sunday. So it's not Dave's tackle box, even though I'm Dave. It's VT talk. And tonight I've got two very special guests with me, as well as the effervescent loveliness and bountiful beautyliciousness that is the one and only Sav. Isn't it, Sav?
It is. It's me that.
Are you doing all right?
I'm doing fine. How's yourself?
Well, I'm baked. I'm nearly done. I think I'm possibly just a shade better done than rare. Which is fine. It's fine. It's all good. I've been sat on the AstroTurf. Real AstroTurf. Not political AstroTurf. Soaking up the rays. Sunbathing. It was an experience. It was very good. But two very special guests that were at the Public Health England Symposium, which is a posh word, on e-cigarettes that was held in the Marble Arch Thistle in London, which it's not a plant, it's a hotel. And I have the two of them sat here. I'll do them ladies before gentlemen, as one should. And we have Lorien C with us tonight. Hello, Lorien.
Hello.
How are you diddling, cock? All right?
I'm good, yeah. I'm recovered now from my long journey home from London, yeah.
Yes. That's all good to hear. And in the PC, which has upgraded itself 33 million times since I switched it on earlier on today. I'm pleased I switched it on a couple of hours early. We have Oliver with us. Oliver, how are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, really good. How you doing, Dave?
Well, you know, I am walking about and breathing, and actually breathing better than I ever did when I was smoking. But that's my choice. Nobody forced me, and I wouldn't force anybody else. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Tonight we're going to try and run you through as best we can what happened at the Public Health England Symposium on electronic cigarettes. And there were one or two surprises. Had I been a betting man, I might have lost some money, but it would have been well worth it. I'm not going to say anything more than bubblegum, and you might get a hint of what it's about. But before we do any of that, of course, we need the titles. So we'll be back right after them. And we are live, and actually that was fabulous music for what happened at Public Health England. Now, Oliver, before we get into that, you look at the smile on his face. You've not heard that before, have you?
No.
If you know the way I look at it, if you're going to have a little bit of music, have some music. But before you turned out to the Thistle, you were at another meeting, weren't you?
That's right. I was at the OTC Bulletins annual conference, which is a meeting of the great and the good of the pharmaceutical over-the-counter medicine world. So a bit more of an interesting event than it sounds, perhaps.
So what went on there?
Well, it was a series of presentations on electronic cigarettes, and I was lucky enough to be on quite early on in the day, so I sort of managed to set a bit of the tone of things. See, I'm still not sure at these sort of events where things are being pitched, whether there's any real honesty about the discussion of where the second and third generation devices lie in terms of their sort of effectiveness compared to the cigarettes, because of course the big OTC development over the last 3 or 4 months has been the Puritane, the emergence of the Puritane. So it was really me trying to say, look, I understand that you're very focused on how to get these things into your stores, but don't miss the big story.
So, given that this was all OTC, so therefore it was pharma, did you get any feel for how pharma views e-cigs as a category? Is there any animosity there? Is Boots still going to stick 2 fingers up to the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, together with various other chemist chains? Was any of that evident?
I'm not sure any of that was particularly evident. I think the main thing really was that I mean, obviously you had the pharmaceutical industry there, but you had the pharmacists as well. And for me, I suppose the most interesting thing was discussing with pharmacists their kind of confusion about the category and how they'd perhaps like to bring things in, but don't feel that they can under the current kind of regulatory aegis. So, I would say, well, why don't you just try out a couple of products, a couple of egos with some liquid, see how it sells. They won't do it. There's a real sense that until they've got real clarity on the sort of the quality and the effects of these devices, they just can't go for it. I sort of said, well, you sell homeopathy. It didn't go down to that.
That probably went down like a Led Zeppelin, did it?
Well, it did, but of course, when I did the panel, because I actually did OTC twice that day. I did OTC first thing in the morning, did my presentation, then I went back for a panel discussion later on in the day, and I just heard Robert, on the Public Health England panel discussion, saying that his research is now showing that there is a small but significant negative effect on smoking cessation from OTC pharmaceutical, OTC NRT. So, of course, I went back and said that to everybody, and that went down like a lead balloon. So,
okay.
Sure how helpful my contribution was perceived to be.
To be honest, I think it's extremely helpful, and we probably need to come back to that as we go along, because I don't know about you, Lorien, but I found the Public Health England thing extremely interesting. Did you?
It was a hell of a day. There are a lot of things I weren't expecting, kind of at the top of good and right down there at the bottom of bad. But in some respects, they weren't necessarily bad.
Well, yes, it's. Shall we? I think probably the best thing to do is start at the beginning of the day and try and work our way through it. How does that strike you? What time did you get there, Oliver?
Well, I didn't get there till just before I sat on that panel, so I guess 2:30. I'm ashamed to say I missed all the morning's fun and games. I would have. I think. What a shame that it was on the same day. I should have just been at that. It sounded like great fun.
It was. Lorien and I'll try and run everybody through there, but just before we do, I'm going to turn to Sav, who's not going to have quite an easy a night as she thought it might be, I suspect. Is there anything from chat before we launch into it?
Nothing major as yet. There's a few comments about Boots and Puritan, and that they should be selling higher end stuff rather than the ecigs. There was a bit of a chat about your shirt match of the Atan and Gary Dibley's barbecue, but we won't go into that one.
Just for the sake of clarity, for those of you that are watching on catch up, I will freely own up. This is salmon pink. I've been told that, and the tan will darken to a nice brown. Give me till the end of August, and I'll be singing "Mammy." Take that any way you like. I don't care. Right, let's get into it then, shall we? So, Lorien, we sat and listened first up to Kevin Fenton with his intro, and I know you were taking copious notes all the way through. I'm here to tell you should be a doctor. I tried looking over your shoulder. I can't read a word you've written. So, give me your feelings. What did you reckon to Kevin Fenton, what he said?
Kevin, he was... a lot of my notes on him aren't necessarily relevant. It was a lot of details. I think the overall feeling from him was very reasonable. He wasn't out to... he didn't expressly say anything that you could have taken offence at. It was all very guarded, very sensible, I think is the way to go, really. The details weren't there in his speech. It was kind of an opening gambit for the day to say what was going to happen. There was also a kind of a warning, if you like, that we were going to be hearing very passionate and extreme views, and that if we could bear that in mind, obviously not just to Dave and I personally, although maybe it was. It was just a balanced opening, what you would hope from in that situation.
Yeah, I took a few notes going through, and he was. There was, right at the start, quite a bit of talk about quit attempts and how the NICE guidance was what Public Health England and the whole of the NHS and everybody else was working to at the moment, purely and simply because that is all there is that these august bodies can actually adhere to. Then we got on to the products themselves, and this is where I want to just bounce a few things off you to make sure I heard it right. He said that the products could be more effective, e-cigs in other words, could be more effective, and I think he was referring mostly to Generation 1 stuff. There didn't seem to be a lot of recognition of Generation 2 and 3 at that stage in the meeting. But he said that there was a 6% relapse to smoking at 1 year from people who had made the switch totally. Did you pick that up?
I did. I wrote that one down. Yeah.
Now, that is in direct. It's exactly the other way on from NRT, which has a 94% relapse to smoking at the end of a year. With e-cigs, it's a 6%.
So, do you know where he was taking that data from? Do you know where that came from?
No.
Is that from Ash's study, or?
Wait, he didn't say where it was from. Did you catch that?
No, it's the first time I've heard it as well.
Yes.
I don't know where that data came from.
That's true. That's remarkable.
There was a lot of this. There was a lot of stuff that we hadn't heard before coming out of the mouths of people who, it would appear, know what they're talking about. So that's one to bear in mind. 6% relapse at a year from people that had completely switched, which is in direct. It's 180 degrees from NRT. Also, he said that dual users, people who both smoke and vape, have a high propensity to go on to quit. I thought, actually, I've written down here balanced at the start. It was very balanced, but as it went further through Kevin Fenton's introduction to it, it seemed to be coming more and more and more highly in favour of e-cigs. Did you get that impression too, Lorien?
I did, but I did feel it was guarded. He didn't really talk about anything to do with them being medicalised or how people should be accessing them, which is why I didn't take him to be for or against. That's why I thought he was very balanced, and he put a very basic argument forward, but he didn't lean either way. It was my feeling. I didn't feel like he was leaning any way, and didn't want to give anything away on that side.
Right. Well, I'll freely admit I've cherry-picked those two bits. That 6% of fully switched relapse at a year, and that dual users have high propensity to go on to quit. And I think, given the propensity for certain people in the tobacco control community to cherry-pick, I'm entitled to do that. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There you go.
Let's examine the dual use thing a little bit more closely. Okay, so we know that out of the University of California, San Francisco, there's this big scare story being promoted that most e-cigarette users are dual users, right? But we also know that the market for e-cigs has doubled every year for about 4 years. Now, if you take that train of thought a little bit further, what it says is that most people that are dual using are relatively new entrants to the category. So in other words, if you track people over time, as this market matures and settles down, we should see more people moving into complete substitution. But because these surveys are being done as snapshots in time, it can't actually pick up that process, and they're also not asking the right questions. Except to say that in the UK we are asking the right questions. This is like the main categorical difference. Ash is asking the right questions. The smoking toolkit asking the right questions, and we're able to pick up on this transitional data over time.
Yes, I think Robert West has got his finger right on the pulse on that one, and he's able to track exactly what's going on, and we'll get to what Robert had to say later on. Can I just say one thing I've just noticed in my notes, actually, and I remember leaning over to you and saying it at the time, which I thought was, I think for me actually stood out as the very relevant bit, obviously apart from the 6% relapse rate. He was very careful not to refer to nicotine use as an addiction. Do you remember? Yes.
And I thought that was quite telling. That it was a deliberate thing not to refer to it as the addiction. Like almost there was going to be a sea change in how they started viewing smokers and vapors. I think you're absolutely right. I felt the winds of change being blown around the room right the way through. Well, until Sally Davis came on. How's that for a segue?
Sorry,
I'm
Sav, go
gonna
for it.
spoil it. I'll just tell you what Chav had to say about that a little bit first. Stefan Didakis says, I know where the 6% comes from. It was in a controlled test at the Institute of Social and Preventative Medicine at the University of Geneva in Switzerland.
Good.
So that's where that came from.
That's Jean-Francois Etter then.
Very possibly, yeah.
Yes.
Entropy has said they can't be more effective. They have to wait 6 months between each new version. How can they be more effective when innovation has been directly legislated against? To which the Morning Stars said, but if he's talking about Generation 1, there can be improvements. And MG Jones has said, it's likely the 6% comes from those that use e-cigs to quit and don't carry on using e-cigs if they're not successful in their quit attempt.
There's a lot to be said for that as well. There is a lot to be said for that as well because, well, you've just got to look at the number of people who use NRT and then become recidivists and go back to smoking. And it's not to do them down in any way, shape or form, but it just shows how effective NRT is. And yeah, you know, if you keep on keeping on with what you use, and the likelihood is you're going to be better off. We'll try that seamless link to Sally Davies again now, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's gone, hasn't it? That ship's sailed. Would you like to handle Sally Davies, Lorien? Because I'm not sure I can without swearing.
Not with the barge pole, if I'm honest, but Sally Davies, wow. I mean, obviously we haven't heard much from her apart from that wonderful piece she wrote. I can't remember what publication it was in now. And if we thought that was bad, well, Jim was much worse. It was, considering she's supposed to be the scientific expert, she's an advisor to the government.
She's the chief medical officer.
Yeah, and that was my first thing. She was at pains throughout her entire speech to make everybody very aware that she was at the top of her game with, I am worried, I tell you this as the head of this profession. I am horrified. Hold on a second. As the CMO, I am protecting the population. I have written to ministers as senior medical advisor. She did this 3 times throughout her entire speech, and it was like a reminder. I am telling you, as your boss, what I think, therefore you should believe it. And interspersed between all of that, we had the willfully aimed at children who wants flavours. She went through this amazing speech about how she'd been, I can't think if it's a train station or an airport with her daughter, whose age we don't know.
Indeterminate.
And she was India. She was mortified that her daughter had dragged her over to an e-cig display, I don't know whose it was, and was enthusing about how beautiful the devices were. She doesn't smoke, she doesn't vape, she wasn't going to buy one. But for her, she literally used the word horrified at this.
Yes.
This is science in action, isn't it? What my daughter said. And yes, and another wonderful nugget was another horrified moment for her was the fact that people could buy e-cigs, take the e-cigs out of the box and put analog e-cigs in there instead.
Analog cigarettes, yes.
Yeah. And to her, this was stuff that she was really concerned all the way through. I'm really concerned. I'm very, very worried. She couldn't have been more negative and lacking in science than. For somebody in her position, it was astonishing, jaw-droppingly astonishing.
Just a bit. I mean, the notes I've got here, she had safety and quality issues. She was worried by TSNAs. They're genotoxic. She's obviously unaware that they're in patches and in every NRT. And she had no intention, apparently, of quantifying the amount of TSNAs. That's tobacco-specific nitrosamines, by the way. I've got here normalisation, worried by vaping. Apparently she's never seen anything other than a Lucky Likey and wouldn't accept my invitation to come into the vaping room, which was a bit of a bugger in many ways, but some people did. We'll tell you about those later. I've got that flavours are aimed at kids.
Oh yeah, willfully aimed at children.
Willfully, what Lorien said, willfully aimed at children. And I managed to collar her at one point and said, can you please tell me a flavour that adults like and children don't, but all adults have got to like it? No. Dose level, do you remember that?
I can't remember the dose level bit.
You can't use an e-cig because you don't know the dose level, apparently. And she's really, really worried about glamorisation, and that was where this... a standardised pack fitting inside a pack of e-cigs. I mean, hell, have you seen the boxes these things come in? It's just not going to work for that. But the bit that appalled me most, and I'm going to share this with the world, she said smokers and vapors should grow a backbone and quit. Sorry, Sav. I suspect that might get some reply. Smokers and vapors should grow a backbone and quit. Cold turkey, that's it. That is the Chief Medical Officer for you. Now, I believe, Oliver, you were saying earlier on there's been some backwards and forwards on Twitter concerning said personage.
Well, she said that in front of a group of very esteemed scientists and professionals who've dealt with, smoking dependence, tobacco dependence, all of their adult careers, who were just absolutely horrified. I think as soon as I got there, that was the first thing that everybody wanted to sort of share was, I cannot believe she said this. She essentially told everybody to buck up as if that was the solution. This is the Chief Medical Officer saying this. And of course, then Robert West on Twitter said, and it's not for me to push for this, but that sounds like a resigning matter to me. I mean, how can you be the Chief Medical Officer of this country and have such little insight into smoking behaviour and smoking dependence and all the issues as to say something as completely facile as that in front of a group of your peers? Although obviously she seems to believe that she's peerless. She's she's the CMO. Everybody else is beneath her. I mean, it flabbergasting. I mean, just astonishing. And it should be in the press, really. I mean, it's just absolutely extraordinary.
Well, one would hope that it would get picked up on the old Twitter there.
I hope so.
I really don't want to go any further on Sally Davies. I want to throw it across the chat because I can see Sav's face.
Chat had a lot to say, not a lot I can read out. Vateman Chuck there says, sounds like she has an authority complex. Stefan Didac says, I wonder if she'd also worry about falling off the planet when she reaches the end of it. Mark Shaw says, it sounds like she was handed the same hymn sheet as Drakeford et al. And also says, Robert West was not happy with Sally Davies at all, especially her comment that smokers should just buck up. Yoda has said, so it's not glamorous to reduce the risk of smoking then. And Matt Didus says, how about the depressives? Should they just man up as well? This is a medical professional.
Yes, I think I go along with Robert West. It might not be his place to say so, but it certainly is mine. Dame Sally Davies, Chief Medical Officer of the United Kingdom and Great Britain, resign. You will kill people. You are not trustworthy. I do not trust you. You should resign. And on that note, I'm going to take the adverts because the blood's boiling just slightly. Back in 2. iVapour and iVapour Elixir, based in Yorkshire, for your e-cig needs. That's iVapour.co.uk and iVapour-elixir.co.uk. iVapour and iVapour-elixir.co.uk, proud sponsors of vaportrails.tv.
couldn't let this comment by Vape and Sam go before we move on, and he says regarding our dear friend, he says peerless, not sure, clueless, most definitely.
Sums it up, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Excellent. And yes, Mark, sure, we are aware of what you've typed in. And we
so agree.
Yeah, we agree wholeheartedly, but we're just not going to go there, because if I let her say that one, God only knows what will get read out. We just can't.
Ooh.
It went something along the lines of, if she wants us to buck up, she can off.
Yeah.
Right. Next up was John Britton, Professor John Britton. And there was some interesting factoids came out of this little lot. Like, did you know what the cost of tobacco-related diseases is to the NHS? Don't you? You're not allowed to answer. You were there, Lorien. Does anybody know? Do you know?
I've heard it's about 6 billion.
Sav?
Yeah, I read something along those lines, yeah.
He reckons 5.
Okay.
The Exchequer gets 10.7. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah.
Tax, stuff like that. He also said that nicotine is definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, on a par with caffeine. That's one of the notes I've got. And that they're a consumer product, and the best example of how harm reduction can be done by a consumer product is snus, the Swedish example. And at the moment, the only people undergoing marketing authorization were BAT. None of the pharmaceuticals are involved. One assumes that he knows what he's talking about. What else did you pick up from John Britton, Lorien?
His section I thought was quite wonderful actually. He did go really hard on the snooze thing. It wasn't a small part of his overall speech. It was quite a large part because he used it as an example.
He did.
As far as he's concerned, snooze was a massive mistake, and as such has cost lives. And his whole point was the fact that we're going the same way with e-cigs. There was no denying that that's what he was talking about. He also he referred to farmers' cartels, which I thought was very telling.
Yes.
He talked about the fact that tobacco control are not keeping up, that the conventional tobacco control policy is not concentrating on smokers, and that it's not changing, and hasn't utilised harm reduction whatsoever. It's completely ignored it. He was so scathing, actually, tobacco control. I was quite shocked.
Yeah, did you get the impression that he was perhaps talking to particular people, not necessarily in the room at the time, but one definitely was?
Oh, there's no question. Yeah, he was really uncompromising. Britain was. For the last year and a half, he's blown a bit hot and cold. We've never been quite sure where he stood. There's no question where he stands now, none at all. And my favourite moment from his section was the photograph of the woman smoking.
Yes.
That, without a doubt, that was a wonderful, and the room laughed and appreciated it. He pulled a picture of a woman sat in a chair, probably in a pub, with obviously laughing at something with a cigarette in her hand. And all he said was, NRT doesn't do this. And all he was talking about was the enjoyment the smokers get from smoking, and the fact that obviously he looked at the scientific side of nicotine addiction, but the behavioural aspects and all of those things are being replicated with e-cigs. And the NRT cannot do that. It cannot work in that way. He was so heavy on it. It was incredible. You wanted to squish him and hug him at the end.
Speak for yourself. I've never been like, looks at shirt, shuts his mouth.
Well,
no, the fact of the matter was he was brilliant. Sorry, Oliver, go on.
No, I was just going to say, all respect to John Britton, because although he's like everybody under enormous political constraints within this particular topic, he stood up a year ago at the National Cessation Conference and delivered a really bullish speech about e-cigs and how they had a lot of potential. The only issue with John has been that he's been absolutely convinced that it's necessary for it to be medicinal in order for these things to be effective. Now, you might have a bit of sympathy with him in a sense that he's probably talking about the first generation devices, remember a year ago, really, none of these people knew anything about the second generation devices. It was all about the first generation. They're now beginning to see and fully understand the difference between first gen and second and third. And I think that's probably modifying a lot of people's positions.
It could be. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit further, because there was in the Q&A later on, what I heard John Britton say was that 20 milligram threshold makes absolutely no sense, and he also said he didn't think medregs would work.
Yeah.
So, that's for later. Sorry, Lorien, go.
No, funnily enough, that kind of links back into snoozing, and what Oliver's saying is exactly right. You know, that his coldness, or his hot and coldness, did come from the fact we were never quite sure if he was on the side of medregs or not. However, what he came out with on Thursday, when talking about snooze, was the availability of snooze, and about customers making the choice at the point of sale, rather than going into pharmacies and whatnot to get it. And that was part of the success of snooze, because somebody can go into a shop, they can go, shall I buy fags? Actually, I might try snooze, because it's there when they're buying their tobacco. And he was really heavy on that. Now, we all know that's not going to be an easy thing to happen if we're saddled with medical regulation, and certainly the choice, because he had a picture of like a huge fridge full of probably 50 or 60 tiny tins of snooze. You can't have medical regulation and have choice and option like that, and that's what he was pushing. People walking in and buying it where they would have bought tobacco.
Yes, he was very much championing the cause of free availability for all of these things. Not to say that they should be free, but they should be freely available, so you can buy them anywhere. In fact, I think it was either him or Robert West said that you should be able to buy these things not only everywhere you can buy fags, but everywhere else too.
Yeah.
They should be blanket everywhere you look. That was the thing that came across loud and clear. Yes, Ollie?
The only reason you might have an objection to that is if you have a hatred of the tobacco industry and you don't want to see them profiting.
Oh, that caused all kinds of problems with everybody. That was the one thing I did pick up at this, that there is a deep hatred, not to say mistrust, but there was a deep hatred of the tobacco industry in a great many of the people that were at this conference. They were regarded as being evil, and by none more so than one particular gentleman who is not getting a name check until it comes to the point to damn him completely. But I think we all know to whom I refer. So John Britton's piece, I think we can both agree, was sterling. I mean, this was championing the cause from, if you like, somebody who seemed to have been quite on the fence a year, 2 years ago, was now very, very much in the, look, we want these, we need to get them out now. That was pretty much what I got from him, yeah?
They're seeing the science, they're seeing the data.
Absolutely. Sav, I can see your eyes flitting around at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
I'm only going to read out 2 comments from that one, and Entropy says, amazing, science has discovered impulse buying. And I thought, yeah, that really does sum it up. And Mark Shaw says, I really do think the tide is turning in public health in the UK. I think many in Public Health England are getting just as fed up with the junk science and propaganda as we are.
I think you're not wrong. I certainly picked that up, didn't you, Lorien? And you would as well. There was a lot of that going on.
Well, listen. One thing, I know. Reflexively, we can sometimes feel a bit like the entirety of public health are our enemy. But actually, look, what vaping is doing is it's actually facilitating a lot of people to take quite radical new stances. That's the other way of looking at it. The people who weren't comfortable with what their colleagues are doing now have a springboard on which to actually come out and say, no, we need a radical alternative. I mean, you know, the 2007 Royal College of Physicians report was quite firm that harm reduction was the way to go, that we needed to give smokers, you know, nicotine and lots of it. But it didn't mention snus. Now snus is on the agenda. I mean, what an extraordinary turn of events. Now, my view is that the only reason that that's happening is because of e-cigarettes.
I think you're right. I do. I think you're right on that. And the RCP recommendation for a nicotine regulatory authority was mentioned on more than one occasion, and with a lot of support from the scientists that were there and the more enlightened members of the PHE audience, shall we say, that was in the place, and that as well came from John Britton, and it was. My notes have gone all to cock here. Where are we?
And jump in with a couple more comments from chat.
Go on.
Talking about the big tobacco influence. Blaze has said that's one of our main problems, the ants' big tobacco entrenched battle, to which Entropy said, and yet they are working so hard to hand the whole industry over to big tobacco. And Vaping Sam says, blaming modern big tobacco now is like blaming Angela Merkel for World War II. Makes no sense.
Well, absolutely right, yes. And the reason my notes have gone all to cock is because my memory was fading slightly. Next up was Anne McNeil, Professor of Tobacco Addiction at King's College London, and her topic was Theory and Practice, Health Inequalities, Use of Electronic Cigarettes and Marketing Implications for Policy. And she's only little, is Anne, but my goodness, what a firebrand. She kept on banging on the desk and so on. E-cigs are not tobacco products. Time after time, and she was consistently adamant that e-cigs denormalise tobacco smoking and normalise not smoking but vaping. What else did you pick up, Lorien?
Oh, do you know, Anne McNeil was absolutely wonderful, and that's the first time I've heard her talk at length about this. Obviously, she was at the summit last year at the behest of, she was I was very supportive actually of Oliver doing the summit at the Royal Society. I know that. There was so much data in there, and she was at great pains to point out she's been doing this for 30 years. 30 years. I mean, I was 5 when she started doing this. She has never seen data like she's seeing now for smoking rates. She has never seen the equality gap for the socio-economic groups. So you've got I think it's 6 groups. 5 or 6 groups for the different socio-economic elements of society, and she talks very openly about the fact that there's a lot of backslapping going on about how we've reduced the smoking rates. In reality, all they've done is reduce the smoking rates in those that are well off. They've made next to no difference in the lower social classes, if you like. Us normal folks. It had no impact whatsoever. And she gave us this lovely graph, which I'm sure is on the website actually, looking at the how e-cigs are spread across the social economic groups, and up until the beginning of this year there were disparities, and the lowest social economic group was the smallest one. This year, for the first time, those groups have levelled out.
Yes.
And she has never seen that, and for her, you could tell these little bits of data that these people are seeing is what's changing their opinion. Now, for her, where her biggest concern was that they've done nothing for the working class folk. Absolutely nothing to reduce smoking rates. This is changing that, and for them that's a massive eye opener. She was so positive. She was positive about advertising.
Yes.
About responsible advertising, about the part and the role that responsible advertising can play, and that it needs to happen. Obviously, with caveats, so as not to encourage smoking and to be a very different thing. And she pulled up adverts to give examples of how to advertise well. She slammed the media. She slammed how badly the media are covering, like the CDC reports, where all the kids are taking up vaping and then smoking. She slammed that. She was so on the ball. It was like a train out of the dark. I was not expecting it for a second. She was wonderful.
Yes, well, you'll be pleased to hear, Laurie, and I'm sure a lot of other people will be pleased to hear that she's agreed to come on VT Talk. As has Professor Robert West.
Fantastic.
And Hayden McRobbie.
Oh.
And a fair few other people.
Not on the same show, that'll be...
No.
Our brains would explode.
Mine certainly would, especially when you add Jim McManus to that list, because he's coming on as well.
I love that man.
Yes. So that was Professor Anne McNeil, and it's time for another break. We may run over slightly tonight because there's still quite a lot to cover. I'm going to try and belt through it all if we can. We'll take a quick ad break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. And we're back in the. We were talking in the background. I do apologise. We were just talking about little bits of feedback that we've had from here, there, and everywhere. We are going to get onto. He's going to have to be mentioned, isn't he? He's going to have to be mentioned because at the end. Sorry, Sav. Yeah, go on. I'm sorry, yes, go on, Sav.
I'm just keeping them to a minimum, but Vic Mullen has said groups have levelled out because of decent starter kits have dropped in price a lot. Stefan Didek said e-cig impact on lower income groups is evident in the US as well because of the general lower cost. Wish someone would do a proper survey on that. The Morning Star said this is changing that, Lorien. They are doing nothing to help, but imagine what would have happened if they'd pushed e-cigs to the working class man. And Neil Roth said if they had thought to ask a working man, they would have known our relationship with Backy a long time ago.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, one of the big things that I discovered at this, and I said to a few people, is that you're trying to have an effect in an area that you actually don't understand. You do not understand smokers. You just don't. You don't know what makes them tick. And you need to be able to get into a smoker's head in order to be able to understand what's going to work. And that's why e-cigs work so well, because they're not more than one step removed. They're fags with all the danger taken out. That's the bottom line on it. But as Lorien's reminded me, and we've got to cover this, at the end of Anne McNeil's piece, when she was on about the fact that so many cigarettes were no longer being sold and that they're being replaced by e-cig usage, he sat there and he put his hand up and got the microphone. Is it not the case we're having a recession now, and that the recession is what we can blame totally for the number of cigarettes not being sold, and e-cigs, which we don't need, have absolutely nothing to do with it? Bubblegum. And what did she say, Lorien?
She said, well, yes, Martin, I did think that myself, and then I looked into it. It was so condescending, it was brilliant. And it was an outright, no, do your research. He tried to put her down, because he actually started it with, did you not think to look elsewhere? He tried to make her look small, and she came straight back. This little teeny tiny woman came straight back and took his head off. It was wonderful.
It was absolutely amazing to watch, and I'm sitting there going, get in. More to the point, around the table that we were sat at, because this was all big round tables, there were a few other people sitting there going, yes, you tell her, Anne, you tell him, Anne. And it was just wow. Next up was Martin Dockrell. Quick potted history of what Martin said.
Martin actually opened up with an attack on McKee, which was really nice. He picked up. It was a fun 5 minutes. He actually opened up before his planned speech to pick up on what he'd said about the recession thing, and he put him down as well, equally as patronising to McKee as McNeil had been. So that was nice. That made me like Dockwell a little bit more than I already did. His whole thing, it was quite simple. He was looking at how the two regulatory groups would work. So the MHR idea of medical e-cig, the 5% tax, having the ability to advertise, availability everywhere, no restrictions on flavours. Then he was comparing that to the TPD with the 20 milligram limit, no advertising, potential restrictions on flavours. And he was kind of talking around those two things. He was generally very positive, but in terms of regulation, that's what he was talking about. He was looking at those two groups.
Yes, yeah, it was pretty much, this is a state of play.
Yeah.
This is where it's at. He didn't come down really on one side or another, although his exposition of what medregs would mean was slightly more scary and not done with half the vehemence that the consumer reg side of things was, and he quite favours a twin track approach. That was pretty much where that was. The only bit where I decided to get on my hind legs and pick him up was when he said there'd been 6 fires caused by e-cigs, and I said, did it occur to him that it might be worthwhile finding out the numbers of fires that had been caused by laptops and cell phones going up in flames? To which he replied he hadn't researched that and didn't have the figures, did I? And I said, yes. And then didn't tell them what they were. But 2.5 million Dell laptops recalled might have something to do with it. I don't know. This was the point, of course, at which we all disappeared off to do our breakout group things. Which one were you in, Lorien?
I was in the smoking in public places and businesses, workplaces.
Yes.
Smoking, vaping.
Vaping. Get it right, girl. Vaping.
Sorry.
Smack your wrist.
Yeah, I know.
Good girl. Thank you. I was in marketing and young people with Professor Martin McKee, Professor Jerry Stimson, and Alette Addison. Alette Addison is very high up in the team that's going to be implementing the TPD, and she was sat right beside me, and I'd managed to lose my pen, so she loaned me one. Indeed, she gifted me one, and we listened to various bits of information coming through. It was chaired by where's she gone? Professor Amanda Amos, who's Professor of Health Promotion at the University of Edinburgh. Yeah, think Ash Scotland. As Ash Scotland was a year ago, you're pretty much where she was at. She kind of led the march, if you like, and went down the road that she wanted to, ably assisted, it had to be said, by Martin McKee, who, when he opened his mouth to speak, said, Professor Martin McKee, with a whole list of all of everything he's ever done, all these letters after his name, and followed by, and vapors hate me. Yes, which I thought, okay, right, fine, get on with it, son. There was a few tuts around the place, but not too many. About 25 in our session, mostly members, I would think, of the Martin McKee fan club. 3 definitely weren't. That was me, Jerry, and Alette Addison. And he, you know exactly what he trotted out, the same old guff he always does, that flavours are targeted straight at kids, that the adverts are meant to glamorise e-cigs and they are only aimed at kids, and so on and so forth. And there was talk about data being gathered up in the northwest by various august bodies up there that was in direct contradiction to what ASH has got, what YouGov has got, what PHE itself has got. All of the recognised data up in the northwest, apparently that doesn't actually happen. Say again?
Let's see it.
Oh, it hasn't been published because it's not peer reviewed. Apparently, according to Martin McKee, if you peer review evidence, it's out of date.
Just reminded me of something, actually, that really links into that peer review thing. My question to Neil at the end of her session, I don't know if you remember, was to ask her if she was concerned about media coverage informing people in the room, public health types. She said she was very, very concerned, and that she was very, very, very concerned about the peer review system.
Well, there you go. So there was a lot of this going on. Anyway, what they said was they came up that they need to look at the grey data. And I made the point that since 1980, whenever it was, since television advertising of cigarettes was banned, and 1987 I think it was, all advertising for cigarette was banned. So that's a long time since 1987. What is it? 17 years? 27 years. 27 years. 27 years there's been no advertising for tabs. You were 7 when that was banned. You smoked, Lorien.
I did, yeah.
You were 3, Sav. Hedging me bets.
A little bit older, but yeah, I get the gist.
Hedging me bets. Yet you smoked. There was no advertising, but you smoked. You can't be more than 22, Oliver. And yet you smoked. And there's all of this no advertising, yet kids smoke. And I wanted to raise the question about nicotine versus zero nicotine, didn't really get anywhere. McKee tried to have a go at me, and then Jerry Stimson got on his back legs and basically said that Martin McKee was talking a load of cobblers, which was absolutely true. He was talking a load of cobblers, and he talked even more later, which we need to get to. Your session, Lorien, quickly.
It's actually pretty good. Mine was all with frontline mental health people, people working in prisons, teachers, all those. So the people working the very front line, and you know, overall it was actually very positive. And the point they liked the most, because obviously I didn't keep my mouth shut very well, was the fact that they need to allow different behavioural differences in smoking and vaping for success in their mental health institutes, young offenders institutes as well, where at the minute everything is banned. And that if they to see success, they need to allow the two different habits to be different habits, and they loved that. They really saw the point in allowing vaping in all these places, and to allow the behaviour to be different. So not going outside for your 5-minute spot to have a cigarette, but actually being free to do it as and when you want to.
Yes, that sounds excellent, and we got feedback on all these sessions from the various different facilitators of them. Before we get into the panel discussion, which we're going to have to blast through, Sav, what we got from chat?
There's so little I can read out.
As good as that, is it?
Yeah, oh, you so need to read back through this. They are awesome.
That good.
I love this chat. But there's a couple of comments. The Furious said, McKay sounds to me like he truly believes the moon is made of cheese.
Bubblegum. No, it's bubblegum. It's definitely bubblegum. It's not cheese, it's bubblegum. I'm telling you now, it's bubblegum.
Bateman Sam says, so how does Martin McKay explain flavoured condoms then? And
I'm not putting one of those in my mouth.
Very boring has said, mental health, get it straight off.
Yes, absolutely.
That's all I can read out from everything chat has typed.
I take it the rest's been very complimentary then, has it?
You get the gist of it, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Arsenal was mentioned a few times.
I see. Without the N.
Yeah.
There's a shock. Following on from all of this was when Oliver came into his own, sat as the sole vapour on the question time panel. And this was run like question time. It absolutely was run exactly like question time. And the questions were read out. And first one was, how confident is the panel that e-cigs won't become a route to smoking tobacco? Now, Amanda, the one that had been in my session, said, we don't know. Stupid woman. You said, Oliver? Was implausible.
No, I did. I just said it's completely implausible. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense for that to be the first fear. Listen, I've got to confess, I don't really know what I said. It was all a bit of a blur, but yeah, I mean, my view is, and I'm sure everybody's view is, that it doesn't make any sense that this would be a route into something that is nowhere near as pleasurable.
Yes, well, you were backed up by Robert West, who said there was no evidence at all of an increase in smoking. There's absolutely no cause for concern. Yes, we need to keep an eye on it, but not going to happen. And then Martin McKay. No, they're all different results. There are real concerns, and I'm really upset, he said. Here we are in a tobacco control conference and nobody's mentioned plain packaging. To which Robert West said, I think you'll find that the conference is about electronic cigarettes. It's not a tobacco control conference. And you saw McKay go, oh shit, I'll just get a little bit smaller. Nobody will see me now. So he did. Then the next question that came up was, would you support only vaping outside to prevent renormalisation? John Britton said, no. Vaping denormalises smoking and it normalises vaping. And more or less said, why are people so thick that they can't see that? Then McKay, did you write down what McKay said, Lorien?
Was this one about New York and Australia?
Yeah, this is where it gets scary. This is where
It
gets
was.
scary. Can I just
was very scary.
Because I know we have some American. I know Stefan's down, and I know we have some American listeners, and I found his answer to that very, very telling and slightly frightening. He said, actually, we're having some great successes. New York, San Francisco, Chicago have all banned it in public places, as if it was, a fait accompli. In other words, he was intimating that the great and the good of American tobacco control have just accepted that this needs to happen, that vaping needs to be banned. To my mind, it was the most telling moment, apart from when he started whittering on about Australia, which is the other, part of the nexus. It was a very telling moment. It shows where his allegiances lie, and I found that disturbing.
Well, as I did, I've written down here insecticide and the tobacco industry involvement. What did you get out of it, Lorien?
The fact that he saw, exactly as Ollie said, all the examples he brought up, as far as he was concerned, they were the future, and that we were aspiring to that, and that we would catch up eventually, but that they were further ahead, as in more advanced, and that it was inevitable that we would catch up, because that was the right path.
Yes. Well, his big fan, Amanda, backed him up. She favours a ban. Robert West, I've written down here, dumped on McKee at every chance. Whatever it was McKee said, Robert West showed evidence that proved he was totally barking. He said the risks are far too low for any legislation. The data doesn't support a ban. In actual fact, it goes the other way and says there should never be a ban and they should be promoted. Oliver said he couldn't believe that people didn't know the difference between that and a fag. I mean, hell's delights. At which point, the David Dimbleby alike decided to take a vote. And he said, right, how many of you are in favour of a ban? And it took them 2 or 3 goes to frame the question, but he finally got it framed. How many of you are in favour of a ban like the smoke-free legislation to just bring it into that exactly the same as tobacco cigarettes? And 10, 12 hands went up.
It was definitely a minority of people in that room.
And then he said, how many definitely don't favour a legislated ban? And what, 80, 90 hands went up?
Yeah.
So David, I don't think it was that overwhelming, unfortunately. I think it was a majority, but it was a convincing minority, but it wasn't quite that overwhelming.
I had a better view than we did.
I would personally call it at 65-35.
Okay, well, you had a better view than where we were sat because we were right off to one side. I saw a sea of hands for the we don't want. And it was definitely a majority against a ban, let's put it like that. And that's a good starting point. Yes?
Definitely.
Right. The next thing was, as I mentioned earlier on, this anything greater than 20 milligram juice as medicines. Was that a good idea? Should they all be meds? Should they all be not meds? What does it? How should it work? And McKee said, no, they should all be medicines. That's it. There should be no threshold at all. It should all be medicines. Oliver came in with.
No idea what I said, Dave.
It was along the lines of one size doesn't fit all and medregs can't cope.
Yeah, it would have been that. I can't remember it sort of deteriorated then, didn't it?
It did a little bit. Robert West dived in with there needs to be a safeguard for drugs, but these aren't drugs.
Yeah.
And with NRT, there's no check when it's bought over the counter. 12-year-olds can get it. This is all, they're just not drugs. They're not medicines. Amanda was just thinking of the bloody children all the way through, wasn't she? You've got to have childproof caps, you've got to have labelling, you've got to have this, you've got to have that, you've got to have the other. Think of the children. And then, as we said earlier, John Britton waded in with the 20 milligram threshold makes no sense and medregs won't work. It kind of, the last one was quite interesting. It was how do we welcome the opportunity of e-cigs without losing the gains of denormalising smoking. Now that it got quite heated, and I'd lost the will to take notes by then. Did you do much, Lorien?
I didn't take any notes, and that was Jim McManus's question. And yes, it did very much get very heated. I think that might have been what did Oliver call it? A Godwin moment.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because as this all went through. Basically, there was a supplementary question asked as to vaping during pregnancy. Robert West and John Britton both came back with the, look, if you can't get the woman off the fags, give her an e-cig. Yeah. Oliver chimed in with, it's going to be safe enough. And then the Godwin moment arrived. That was when McKee said, "That's what they said about thalidomide," and he got booed, didn't he? And it
was horrendous.
It wasn't a quiet boo. This was the whole of the audience going, "You did not just say that." With
I had two people to my left of me saying disgusting.
Yes,
it was.
My left said disgusting, and I heard myself say absurd, and it sort of echoed around the room. It was a very strange moment.
Yeah, it was really odd.
I think that was the point at which Martin McKee jumped the shark. His credibility, had he any left, disappeared up the flue like a fag paper being lit. He had no friends. He scuttled off out because he had another meeting to go to, and the next little bit of questioning that came around went to Robert West, and he said, "It's such a shame that Martin McKee's not here, although maybe it's not," and got a round of applause. And I think that says it all. Hey, we're over time and we need to wrap this up. I'm going to say I found it hugely informative. We've made contacts that want to talk to us, to vapers, all of us, right? They want more information. They want more personal information. They want more personal contact. There's all sorts of stuff is going to be going on. And I think we do need to share that with you. But Sav, let's take a few words from chat before we disappear.
Yeah, Mark Shaw says, "It's telling. It shows there is a section out there planning, orchestrating and conferring against e-cigs." Stefan has said, "In Glant's hometown, they passed an ordinance where people can't smoke or vape in their own home, owned or rented, if they have a wall that is shared with another property or home." And Midge Dog says, regarding Martin McKee, can he add his boo to that comment also? And I've got some great comments to end with, which have been gathering pace all night.
Great stuff. Well, look, as I say, I don't know about Oliver and Lorien, but I found it an extremely useful day, and we're told it's the first of many, and it was actually a consultation, we discovered. It was the most positive public health event I've been to in a long time, and it's going to be followed up at the UK National Smoking Cessation Conference, at which there's going to be a team down there as well, which is brilliant stuff. We'll be bringing Louise Ross on the show because she was also a part of this and she's got a lot to share. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it. Neither could Jerry Stimson tonight. He's on his way organising the Global Nicotine Forum and various other bits and bobs. We're going to be hearing from a lot more people who really, really know what they're talking about on VT Talk in weeks and months to come. So do stay tuned in. I need to say thank you to Lorien and ask you, how did you feel about the whole day?
I found it amazing, and let's not forget, as they pointed out, we were invited in. They wanted us there. Maybe not us personally, but they wanted vapers involved, and that's never happened when they're talking about a subject before.
No, and let me make a point, and I need to make a point, and this speaks to Martin Dockrell. When I arrived at the venue slightly earlier than I perhaps should have done, he had made arrangements for a vaping room to be set up so that we wouldn't sully anybody's sight and upset them. That had been countermanded. When Kevin Fenton arrived, Martin went to see Kevin and said, "Look, we need this," and Kevin said, "Hell yes we do." Not in those words, but as vehemently as that. And the vaping room was reinstated. And that says, to me, that says a lot, because had the atmosphere not been quite as positive, they would have just gone, "Oh, well, fair enough." But they fought for it. Martin Dockrell and Kevin Fenton fought for that, for us, so we could demonstrate. And we did demonstrate to a lot of people, did we not?
We were never alone. No one gave us a moment's peace. We almost missed our lunch because that vaping room was always with people, important people, who wanted to talk to us.
Yes. It's a bit like when you go to a party and everybody went where the smokers were. It's exactly like that. So, thank you for joining us tonight, Lorien. Oliver, your thoughts on the whole day, taking everything, OTC and the PHA meeting into account, what's your feelings?
My feeling is that we have the data now. This was always going to be carried by the science, and the wonderful thing is that we have people out there in the UK and France, it has to be said, collecting the right data. Again, speaking to my American friends, our big priority in the United States has got to be to get the toolkit taken over to the US. It has to be the number one priority, because otherwise, if we don't have this data to show the FDA and the CDC and so on and so forth, we're never going to change people's minds. The one thing that is changing people's minds is the data, and it's that simple. And one more thing to add, because I think people will find this interesting. In the session that I attended later on in the day at the OTC Bulletin, there were two gentlemen from GSK there, and they both said in no uncertain terms, e-cigs will never be passed as medicines.
Yes, I believe I said that 2 years ago. They'd never ever get a marketing authorization. Never. It'll never happen. But thank you, Oliver, for joining us tonight, because I wanted to know more about the OTC stuff. I think it's fabulous. I know you'll come back again if we need you to, yes?
Of course.
Brilliant stuff. All that remains for me to do is to throw it across to Sav, because she's bouncing up and down. I can see the smile on her face. She's really chuffed about what's coming up. Come on then, Sav.
Well, chat, I have to say, I've been absolutely phenomenal tonight. Both comments I've been able to read out and the ones that I haven't. They've kept me more sentient. But I've got a couple of comments that I'd like to read out before we go. And Vape and Sam has said, just look at caffeine again. You find it in coffee, you also find it in headache pills. There's space for both markets. Let the consumer decide what floats their boat.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Died at 77 has said, I spoke to a man today. He knew nothing about vaping, but he thought kids going to smoking through vaping is like giving up a smartphone for a call box. It's not going to happen.
Oh, that is such a
Brilliant.
good, that's brilliant. Note that one down. Everybody tweet it. Tweet it, tweet it, tweet it until you have no tweet left. Just, that's brilliant. Is that the last one, Sav?
That's it. That's the last one.
Well, I've got to say thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you to my guests. Thanks to Sav. Have you had a hard night tonight, or was it easier?
No, it's been a pleasure tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great stuff. Thanks to the backroom team and everybody involved, and a big thank you to my wife, whose birthday it was today, who graciously gave me permission to do the show, because she knows how important it is for everybody out there. We're going to keep on keeping on, all of us, every vapor throughout the world, keep on keeping on. The tide is turning, the winds are changing, things are now moving in a direction that I think we can work with. There's going to be more coming up. Conversations I've had lead me to think that everything is not as we thought it was. Things are going to get better, and that is probably the best bit of news that I could leave you with tonight. So until I see you tomorrow night for the Haze Hour, because it is tomorrow, isn't it? Yes, because it's Sunday today, because this wasn't Dave's Tackle Box. So until I see you tomorrow for the Haze Hour with Keith and with Kat, from all of us here, good night, take care of each other, God bless and all of that kind of stuff, and don't forget, vape on, vape hard, and don't let the bastards grind you down. Till we see you next time, take care. Night night. Say night night, everybody.
Night night, everybody.
Night night.
Goodbye.